No one in Latin America knows this is happening. And I think that's very significant. Because if they did, I think that, whether they're on the left or the right, or whether they believe in the official climate change narrative or not, why would you want this particular satellite company doing this, for example? Obviously a rather controversial proposal, and the local governments aren't managing the carbon credits at all. They're being traded and sold and custodied and all of this by these other groups. Not the local governments themselves. And also there's an effort to put this entire carbon market infrastructure expressly on the Bitcoin blockchain through a sidechain protocol.
This week on Garethicka Tonight, investigative journalist Whitney Webb joins us from Chile to discuss her latest investigation, Debt from the Skies. Webb reveals how Latin America is being targeted by powerful entities pushing climate change agendas that impose massive debts on vulnerable countries through complex financial instruments like carbon credits and debt-for-nature swaps, leading to a loss of sovereignty and control over natural resources. Webb also discusses how blockchain technology and Bitcoin are integrated into these schemes, tracking and enforcing these financial instruments. At the time of this discussion, Bitcoin's price is around $70,400, reflecting a 1% increase in the past 24 hours and an 8% increase over the past 30 days, with 19.7 million out of 21 million total Bitcoin in circulation.
As far as, exploiting people and resources in Latin America goes, when you're, the most vulnerable in countries like Peru, Colombia, and others, when they've been targeted, they're essentially voiceless minorities, a lot of them, and they have no way to really, negotiate or try and protect what's theirs. And oftentimes, the militaries will be brought in against, these relatively vulnerable and voiceless people for the benefit of multinational mining corporations, for example. So, it really depends. It would really have to be sort of like a very significantly wide movement. And unfortunately, especially in the post-COVID era, there was this big effort to onboard everyone onto smartphones and cashless this and digital everything. And a lot of people have become, kind of mesmerized and much more docile, I would say, in Latin America after the COVID situation and everything and its impacts here. I would hope that there would be pushback. I live in Chile, and there is a good amount of pushback and efforts to start mining in southern Chile. But, it depends, because a lot of the people that are looking to mine and extract and exploit are the most powerful people in the world and view, lithium, cobalt, and a lot of these other minerals that can be found in Latin America or in the Andes specifically, as essential to their ambitions for net zero 2030 and the electric vehicle, quote unquote, revolution. There's efforts to create all sorts of new financial projects under the guise of conserving nature or combating climate change, which are basically about, securitizing the natural world. I've written about this before in the context of natural asset corporations, but there's efforts to also create things like old growth forest bonds and all sorts of things like that. And the goal is to have it all be on blockchain and, tokenized so they can be easily traded. And this is, one of the major ambitions of people like Larry Fink, who is now, a big proponent of the Bitcoin ecosystem under certain metrics only, of course, and is also promoting the need to put literally every financial product on blockchain so that it can be easily tradable and give it, a unique digital ID. So it's all part of this system that's been created, under the guise of, under the auspices of the UN, for example. But there's a lot more going on here as well. There's like efforts also by the UN, the World Bank, and some of these other groups to institute what they call a climate wallet that would interface with digital ID and a presumed, CBDC digital wallet and have it interface with this carbon credit system. Recently, in just the past couple of days, we've had Christine Lagarde of the ECB say that the entire financial system needs to be rewired for climate change. And she's not the only one saying that. You have the head of climate finance at the UN, Mark Carney, former head of the Bank of England and Bank of Canada, and former Goldman Sachs guy, I'm also saying similar things. Larry Fink is saying similar things. The banker consensus is that the entire global economy has to be remade. And one of the main pillars of that new system they wish to impose on us is the carbon market, which they currently refer to as the voluntary carbon market. But like digital ID, it will be voluntary in name only. And so, the question is, how do you participate in the market? Are you going to be the person buying up the carbon credits? Are you going to have that capital? Or are you going to be selling off your carbon credits or selling off, your land and your resources, trying to monetize them in order to have some sort of, greater capital in this new system they're making?
As Whitney discusses the complex web of climate finance and debt, she explains how international organizations and financial institutions use climate change initiatives to control Latin American economies. She provides detailed examples of countries burdened with unmanageable debts under environmental sustainability programs, and how, since COVID, there is a push for digital wallets across Latin America. Webb's extensive research and on-the-ground investigations reveal strategies employed by these powerful entities, offering a look at the true cost of these so-called green initiatives. Her insights emphasize the need for awareness and resistance against these economic exploitation tactics masked as climate policies. Let's listen more to what Whitney has to say on this discussion.
So, in focusing on what may happen to get us there, I prefer to focus on where they're trying to take us, because that's something that we can look at, document, and it's very clear. And that may help us, help more effectively resist the psyops that we are being barraged with to try and get us to consent to all of this. And of course, one of the main things here is to basically do what they did during COVID with vaccine passports, impose digital ID on everyone, because that is the foundation for the whole Sustainable Development Goal or Agenda 2030 agenda, which is about remaking every aspect of our lives for global technocracy. Among other things. And so, there's a big effort right now that I've been focusing on in some of my articles, efforts to manufacture consent, for example, in the US for a biometric entry-exit system under the guise of tackling illegal immigration. And this is happening in other places in the world as well. And I would argue that what's going on there is an effort to convince the populist, right-leaning populists in the U.S. To support digital ID, which they were against during the COVID era. And there's a lot of other efforts to do that as well, whether it's, trying to sell it as necessary for voter identification when you could continue using the same IDs that people have used before, or use physical IDs as opposed to digital IDs. And I think a big part of that is because they need to psyop us and manufacture consent for these policies, because they won't work without our compliance and our obedience to them. And so, what happened in COVID was a big test for a lot of that. But obviously, they've learned lessons from that, and we should have as well. And we need to focus on not complying with these various policy goals and not onboarding to these various systems they're going to try and force us onto, and find ways to live independently from them. Because whether it's, war or famine, they could try and offer what they're doing now with the World Food Program's Building Blocks program. If you want rations, humanitarian rations, you want to be able to eat. If you're a refugee, you have to scan your eyeball and pay with a digital wallet linked to your biometrics. It essentially operates the same way as Sam Altman's WorldCoin, which is being, foisted on people in Latin America right now that are in places that are, experiencing a lot of economic desperation, like Argentina specifically. And that could be one way they try and onboard people. It could be saying we need everyone to have. We need to know who everyone is for everyone's safety, coming at it from the safety angle, or everyone has to have digital ID to get online, to stop hate speech, to stop terrorism before it happens. I mean, there's infinite number of narratives they could use. They could use, they're talking about the bird flu thing right now. They could try and just do what they did during COVID and go back to vaccine passports and try and get digital ID that way again. I think they're considering that if one of those doesn't work, maybe they'll do all three or do more. But ultimately, the goal is to get us onboarded to digital ID. So we should keep our eyes on that and resist that at all costs and refuse to comply, regardless of the justification or the selling points or the psyops. We should know that that is the thing to be resisted, because once that system is in place, they can essentially do everything they want. They have their social credit paradigm, they have complete surveillance control, and that's ultimately what the goal of a lot of these policy agendas are. And of course, digital ID is intimately folded into the idea of digital programmable and surveillable money, whether it's a central bank digital currency or the efforts by the private commercial banks to issue CBDC equivalents, which doesn't get enough airtime, in my opinion, because they're definitely doing that as well. But ultimately, it's to have force upon people a programmable, surveillable existence. And that is what we should be focusing on and resisting. And there's a lot of efforts to have us focused on one piece of the different puzzle, or one of the possible avenues that they will use to try and scare us really into onboarding into these systems. But if we keep our eyes on what the policy agenda is, we can avoid a lot of those things that are sent intentionally to distract us or to unsettle us or to make us afraid, and focus on resisting and not complying.
As the push for digital wallets is promoted in Latin America under the narrative of climate control, will this ultimately push people into complying with these systems? Imagine a world where, to eat, you have to scan your eyeball, like the World Coin project from Sam Altman being pushed in Latin America. Do you think we will go back to how things were during COVID, making us more on board with digital wallets? What are your thoughts on Whitney Webb's revelations about the hidden costs of climate finance? How do you see Bitcoin playing a role in resisting these economic control measures? Share your views in the comments below. Hit the like button if you found this discussion insightful. And don't forget to subscribe for more episodes of Only the Savvy.